Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Shadowtech Goddess, Part 1, Chapter 11, The Hunt for the Anatameter begins. Last week, we discovered who the loves of Paymaster Stenstrom are going to be across 8 universes. They vary quite a bit. There's Gwendolyn, Lady Gwendolyn Apprentice, very starched and stuffy, very professional, at least most of the time. Her fleet uniform. We have quite the opposite with Melazarr of Caroline, a debauched brat from Zaffin space, over 7 feet tall. Now, I describe her as being eye to eye with Stenstrom wearing heels, but in time, my view of her grew, so she's actually larger. She is a giant, after all. Even though I say she's a certain height, she's actually bigger. J.K. Rowling, eat your heart out. We have Tara de la Anderson, the first officer of the ship, a little tough girl from Baz that Paymaster Stenstrom just considers as a friend, and she almost became his love in this plane of reality. And Stenstrom was terrified. He actually had the comm officer distract her so she couldn't enter the conference room. According to Alesta, the next person who enters the conference room will be his love, and he didn't want it to be Tara. So she has her own book, which is in process, and it's pretty weird. Yeah. There was also Kat, the crazy little black cat that Paymaster Stenstrom had mad fisticuffs with in the ruins of Clovis. He had her little ball of Shadowtech in his coat. He pulled it out. It formed into a likeness of her, and her name appeared on the disc. So Kat is also one of his loves, and her book is already done. I already did the readings for it. Go take a listen if you haven't already. It's probably my best work, just as far as creating a character from scratch. And that's always fun, and I really like how that book turned out. He tried to get Morgan Jeterix to be one of his loves, because he fancies her, and they have sort of a passionate sort of sexual tension between the two, but he couldn't quite get her. Something happened, and where the slot on the disc where her name should have been, there was nothing but this weird kind of shape-shifting cloud. And then, lo and behold, in comes Gwendolyn with a load of papers, and the disc confirms that she is his love on this plane of reality, and her name actually appears 4 times, while everyone else just gets 1 occurrence, and that's significant. We will find that out later, why it's significant. It also said where he has to go next to discover the location of our favorite MacGuffin, the Anatameter. Since the creepy entity in the Hall of Mirrors stole it, he's got to get to it and turn the knob 7 more times, and then book over, and we can all go get a beer. This week, The Hunt for the Anatameter begins is the last chapter in Part 1. Naturally, after this, next week, we will proceed immediately to Chapter 2, which is called The Loves of Paymaster Stenstrom. Should be fun. Now, for the first time ever in all these readings that I've done quite a few at this point, I've got to issue a profanity alert. We're going to meet a character who's got a frickin' potty mouth. And that's almost unheard of in my books. Profanity just isn't my game. If you have someone who writes a book and everybody's swearing like a sailor, it's just a lazy way to try to convey dialogue, to create characterization. If someone's just got a filthy mouth, and it gets very repetitive and it's very lazy, and it's just not part of my gig. But in this case, it is part of the gig. We only have 1 character who's swearing hard enough to burn your ears off. That does say something about that character, about what's going through their head, about their mindset, and so forth. And sometimes these characters sort of write themselves, and that was true in this case. You're not going to need me to tell you who it is. You're going to figure it out. Just remember, there's going to be a lot of cussing whenever this character is around. Yeah, so be warned, be fair warned. There's gonna be swearing afoot. Well then, let's proceed immediately. Part 1, Chapter 11, The Hunt for the MacGuffin, the Anatameter, begins. Aram landed the ripcar in the tall grass. Gwendolyn hopped out first, her blue coattails fluttering as her boots dug into the soft ground. It was midday at the ruins of Caroline. The emerald green Halaland stretched out bumpy and low to the north as far as Stenstrom could see. To the south was the craggy shoreline. The choppy waters of the Straits of Elder scraped against the land. To the northeast, situated squarely in the water, was the tall spire of the Sisters' Lighthouse of Caroline. The light from its blue lens, visible even in broad daylight, panned about in a never-ending revolution. Stenstrom checked his ints and jumped out. Gwendolyn took in the sights with an empirical xenon eye. "So, what are we doing here again, please?" "We're here to locate Madame Melazarr and gather information pertaining to the attack and destruction of her vessel." Aram helped Alesta out of the ripcar, she very ladylike in her Marian robes and buttoned-up boots. Gwendolyn wrapped her hand around the hilt of her fedula. "I still don't see why our personal intervention is required. The local magistrate is more than capable of handling this matter." Stenstrom smiled. "Would you like to tell her, Alesta, or should I?" Alesta scowled. "Tell me what?" Gwen asked, elbowing Stenstrom in the ribs. "The final message the Hoban Night broadcast pertaining to the Shadowtech goddess has me curious, and, as Melazarr was a witness to the whole event, I want to interview her." "That mythical creature again," Gwen asked. "Why such interest in this bell? Are we privateers or a warbird full of scholars pursuing a quaint research project? We ought to be making full sail in pursuit of the raiders who sank the Hoban Night. That's how we can best serve that harlequin slut from Caroline. Right, Alesta?" Alesta held her robes and flushed. "Normally I wouldn't agree with you, Gwen. However, that crazed woman could use time praying in a proper convent." She turned to Aram. "Rami, are you certain this is the correct place?" He discreetly pulled the disc out of his coat and consulted it. "Yes." He slipped it back into his pocket. Alesta sighed in frustration. As before, the ruins of Caroline lay like pieces of charcoal scattered about a vast grassy patch. The place seemed very still and abandoned. Stenstrom put his hand to his mouth. "Melazarr, we're here from the Seeker, ready to take you to safety. We have questions about the attack on your transport. Melazarr!" Nothing. He turned to Aram and Alesta. "Have you any guidance or insight regarding this development?" Aram, still in his blue Calvert suit, shrugged. "No, only that this is the correct place to be." Stenstrom lowered his voice so that Gwen, browsing through the ruins some distance away, wouldn't hear. "But do you agree that being here is the appropriate course of action, given the clue on your device and the Shadowtech goddess connection?" "I would say so, yes," Aram replied. "Sorry we're not more help, but perhaps we'll get some insight here. What do you think, Bear? "I think if she's here, she might receive something sure enough. A black eye and the kick in the rear," Alesta said. Gwendolyn laughed and examined some faded flowers at the base of a nearby stone. "You want to know what I think, Belle?" "I believe I can imagine what you think at the moment, Gwen." Stenstrom waded further into the ruins with Gwendolyn pausing when he came to a crossroads. To the left were the remains of a parlor or antechamber. To the right, down a ways, was the old Caroline Chapel, the most intact structure remaining on the grounds. "You know, Gwen, the light here gives your scar the slightest shade of rose." She winced and covered the scar running across her cheek with her hand. "You know I'm sensitive about that, Belle." "Why?" "I think it gives your face character," he said. "So where's Melazarr? When that ship was attacked, she should have been zapped back down here as usual, and I want to know what happened." "Well, perhaps the unthinkable occurred, and some poor soul was here waiting when she arrived, and they've gone off to an evening of illegal activity. I pity that person, whoever he or she might be," Gwendolyn said. Some distance away, Lady Alesta found a stone adorned with a colorful assortment of flowers and cards, left by gentlemen past. She picked up a few cards, seated herself, and read them. She was touched. "Oh, these poor gentlemen. They come out here seeking love, their hearts on full display. And look what might await them. A debauched harlequin in a wire gown and a glowing face, ready to waylay and mangle. Lady Alesta, that was not at all nice, Stenstrom called to her. She continued reading. She did not take back her words. She's got a point, Belle, Gwendolyn said, standing tall on a rock. She put her hand to her mouth. Bitch! Melazarr! Come out from whatever sleazy nest you're currently naked in, you walking, talking hellhole! Aram and Alesta laughed. Stenstrom couldn't help but chuckle. If Aram and Alesta were correct, Gwen was destined to be his countess, the matter decided for him by universal fate, despite his feelings for Morgan and fascination for Kat. Gwendolyn, Stenstrom replied, that woman could have been killed in space. Perhaps next time, then, she said. Aram reached into his coat and pulled out the device again and consulted it. Still the same? Stenstrom asked. Aram nodded. Stenstrom looked around the craggy ruins. So I take it we're in the Hall of Mirrors again. Probably so. And this time we're expecting your enemy to come out, Aram said. My enemy? That's what we were told. Out of the nodes of reality, first your love, then your enemy. We have your love, Gwen. Now we await your enemy. Then the location of the Anatameter will be revealed, Aram said. If that's the case, then I want you, Alesta, and Gwen to get in the Ripcar and go. I want you gone from here. But Belle, you might need our help. The sisters are with me, and what I need most is peace of mind that you three are safe. Okay? That's how you can help. Aram wanted to argue, but saw the wisdom in leaving Stenstrom alone with the unknown. Bear, we're going. Gwendolyn emerged from the rocks. We're leaving? She asked. Not me. Aram and Alesta are leaving, and so are you, Gwen, Stenstrom said. I'm not leaving you here alone with that giant-sized trollop. Stenstrom was in no humor to argue. Gwendolyn, you're vacating the area, and that's an order. She turned beet red and showed all the signs of becoming fiercely insubordinate and having a frosty row with him right there and then. But, after glancing at Aram and Alesta, Gwen restrained herself. Why am I leaving? Please? She asked in an enraged calm. Because it's come to my attention this ruin might not be safe, and I would feel better knowing the three of you are out of harm's way for the time being. Honestly, Gwen, I can handle a wayward Zaffin girl. Can you? Stenstrom escorted them back to the Ripcar, sitting lonely near the sea. Aram helped Alesta get seated, and Gwen climbed in, her fedula rattling. We shall discuss this in further detail later, Paymaster, Gwen said as Aram strapped her in. I look forward to it, Gwen. All right, don't forget about me. We'll be back for you in 2 bells, Aram said, climbing in. We'll fly west to Farron, get some lunch to pass the time. You want us to bring you anything? I'm good. Thank you. Stenstrom tapped the hood of the Ripcar with his fist for luck and walked away. As he re-entered the perimeter of the ruins, he heard the small ship climb into the sky and move safely away to the west. He felt rather alone and missed their presence as the Ripcar sailed past the horizon. If Aram and Alesta were correct, then he could expect his enemy to appear in these ruins. What sort of enemy, he could only guess. Old gods, extraplanar creatures, demented entities drawn to the Anatameter. Who knows? And furthermore, if they were correct, then the Shadowtech goddess was here somewhere as well, waiting to come out and lay waste to anything in her path. The sisters were with him. He could feel their power tucked up inside. The sisters' power came and went. They gave it to him when they wished, and they took it away just as easily. The easiest way to know if their power was with him was to look at Morgan. If she appeared painted, then the power was there. To see her normal meant it was gone. The sisters, though, were reliable enough to always give it to him when he needed it. With it, he should be able to handle whatever was to come. And he had his weapons and his skills. He hoped he was ready. The ruins were quiet. The grass was still, a bit dewy from morning. So far, there was no sign of Melazarr, just a level green and tumbled stones. He moved past broken shards of blackened rock littered with the colorful and hopeful detritus of past loves, coming at last to a crossroads. To the left was a long retaining wall leaning to one side in the grass, while to the right was the remains of the Carolines' old chapel. Left and right, the hall of possibilities and the danger that lurked within. A dash of movement caught his eye. Off to the north, a figure in black crouched and chest-high grass. He pulled out his mega eye and hoisted it to his face. The figure was small and lithe, seemingly female in shape. He saw the stitching in her black clothing, and her green eyes peeking through her tight-fitting mask. A black tail flicked. Was that Cat? The black cat he had encountered in Clovis? The one he'd fought with? The same cat who would be his soulmate in another reality, according to Aram's disc. Despite himself, he called out to her. "Cat!" The figure moved slightly on hearing the name. "Who's Cat?" came a slightly annoyed voice from behind. He whirled around, and there, standing in the sun, tall and proud, was Gwendolyn. He was enraged. "What in the name of creation are you still doing here? You're supposed to be in the rip car with Aram and Alesta." Gwendolyn got fully in his face. "I didn't want to be on the rip car. I want to be here with you. I gave you an order. You know, I don't like much being ordered around." He glanced back to the green north of the ruins where Cat had been. She was gone. "Things could get dangerous here, and I don't want to have to worry about you. I was thinking in your best interests." Gwen looked incredulous. "Dangerous? How so?" He seethed in frustration. He had to remember Gwen didn't know what Aram and Alesta had told him, but her natural courage and homegrown Xenon stubborn streak were working against him. "Will you do me the courtesy, then, of waiting by the shore?" "I will not." "Who's Cat?" "The black cat who nearly killed you and Aram and Clovis. That's who. I saw her." Gwendolyn took his mega eye. "Wants a rematch, does she?" She scanned about to the north. "I don't see anything." Stenstrom TK'd into the air and had a good look about. He saw nothing. "Nor do I." Where did she go? A small part of him wanted to seek her out, to talk. Her name on Aram's disc stuck in his mind. Cat. Soulmate. "I enjoyed fighting you." "Did you enjoy fighting me?" she had asked. Yes, he had. A chilly wind blew in from the sea. Gwendolyn hugged herself. "When we find this person, I've got a few things I'd like to say to her." "Xenons can fight black cats as well as the Vith," Gwen said, then headed off in the direction of the chapel. The chapel. If they were in the Hall of Mirrors and Aram's description of it was correct, then Gwen, moving to the right of the intersection, was unknowingly walking down the Hall of Possibilities towards the Shadowtech goddess. "Gwen, wait!" She stopped and looked back. What good was it to be the sister's fist, to be nearly invulnerable, when there was a very vulnerable, very mortal person standing nearby? Small wonder most of the previous fists employed by the sisters operated alone. It was easier that way. He took off his HRN coat, then held it out. "Gwen, take your coat off." Gwen cracked an ear-to-ear smile. She took off her fleet coat, folded it neatly, and set it on a building stone. "So you do love me." "Of course I love you." She allowed him to drape the HRN around her. The coat had a number of arcane properties, one of which seemed to be invulnerability. No matter what damaging hell or misadventure he put the coat through, it survived unscathed. It didn't even get dirty. He had a thought it might also protect the wearer in such a fashion. "I love how this feels," she said, sliding her arms into the spacious sleeves. The coat was slightly too big for her, especially in the tails. "Takes the bloody chill right out of the air. Alesta told me you'd be offering me your coat." "That right? Just before you decided to hop out, correct?" "Yes." She said in the rip car, "If you love me, you'd give me your coat. I love you too, Belle." She also said congratulations. She gave him a kiss. "What's that all about? What did I win?" Stenstrom looked her over. The long coat suited her, the dark green fabric, the glinting HRN on the collar enveloping the frills of her white fleet shirt. "You won a trip for two to the ruins of Caroline and Hala." He straightened the collar for her. "Now, do me a favor. See that chapel over there?" Gwen glanced at it. "What about it?" "Please stay away from it. I've heard it's structurally unsafe, that a gentleman injured himself there recently." He had heard no such thing, of course. "Fine by me," she said, slipping the mega eye into one of the hidden pockets. Gwendolyn adjusted her fedula to account for the length of the HRN and threw her arms around him. "Perhaps this wasn't a waste of trip after all. How fortunate for you that you don't need to resort to a fad or gimmick to find love. Your love is before you, sir." Stenstrom could swell Gwen's fine perfume and feel her loving arms around him. Still, a tiny, distracting voice rang from somewhere deep. Where was Cat? All right, since you're here, please cover the north grounds, and remember, stay away from the chapel. Stenstrom watched her as she drifted north through the maze of old masonry, thoughts of anatameters and an inscrutable hall of mirrors vexing his thoughts. He wished Gwen wasn't here. He wished she was on the damn rip car heading west. Next, you will meet your enemy, Aram had said. Gwendolyn froze in her tracks. Belle, come here. He sprinted towards her and came upon a horrific sight. Ahead, standing upright against a tall shard of stone, was Melazarr of Caroline. She appeared to be unconscious. Her head lolled against her shoulder and her face was swollen as if she'd been beaten. She was tied to the shard by a coiled-up length of wire wound so tightly around her chest and shoulders she was bleeding where the wire cut into her skin. A fire burned nearby, and she was red in some places, blackened in others. Wisps of cloying yellow smoke drifted up around her head. The hard green lacquer she had painted her hair with was cracked, revealing a bird's nest of fawn-colored hair within. Long strands drifted around her neck and shoulders. Some distance away, her very merry garter belt, ripped and torn like a mangled snake, hung from a stone. Gwendolyn drew her fedula. Gods, look at her, she's trussed up like a nether-day goose. And she's badly burned. I'm gonna cut her free. She needs Morgan to look her over immediately. Stenstrom put his hand out and stopped her. Wait. Belle, what are you doing? She needs help. She raised her voice. Melazarr, we're going to free you. Gwen's voice carried around the ruins in a loud echo. Two larger objects hanging from the wire like festive ornaments fell free and clattered to the ground. He pulled her around the corner of a nearby stone. Gwen, look at that wire binding her. Look at it carefully and keep your voice down. She peeked around the stone, then pulled out the mega-eye. She focused in on Melazarr. I see the wire. It's metallic, fairly fine gauge, like piano wire or something. She was puzzled. There's a methodical movement along the length of wire, like insects or... She adjusted the lenses. The movement is coming from a number of silvery charms traveling along the length of the wire. Some of them are emitting that yellowish gas hovering around her head. She lowered the mega-eye. Looks like Vith mysticism to me. Stenstrom whispered, I think this exact contrivance is what blasted me out of the Clovis vault the other day. I remembered something like that there. Those pendants on the wire maintain some sort of constant vigilance. And not only that, they can unleash hell in any number of ways. So what are we going to do? She can't remain there. Stenstrom peeked around the corner. The two objects that had fallen off the wire were creating rising pillars of greasy black smoke. He thought they might explode. He flopped on top of Gwendolyn and waited for several long seconds as she noisily struggled beneath him. Shh, he said. Be quiet. Nothing happened. Cautiously, he got back up and peered around the corner. The pillars of black smoke were gone, replaced by two people, a gentleman and a lady. They were dressed in black, expensive-looking garments. The gentleman wore a dapper coat with a buttoned-up vest and tiny, near-brimless hat. The lady was in a long, lacy gown of a style and taste Stenstrom didn't recognize. Her lanky, bony arms were wrapped up in black gauze or bandages that extended all the way to her wrists, revealing her pale, spidery hands. Her wrappings reminded Stenstrom of the white wrappings the sister wore. She had shiny, walnut-brown hair piled up in coiled braids and pushed into a vast, fancy hat that sat on her head like a manhole cover. She squinted behind a tiny pair of lenses similar to the ones Aram wore, though much smaller and clinging precariously to the end of her nose. She carried a large black handbag. Her face was remarkable for the fact that it was so unremarkable, neither ugly nor pretty. She did, however, bear a crazed, rather insensate look, particularly in her eyes, like a nightmarishly dark nanny, an insane librarian or tax accountant from the pit of hell. A smoldering cigarette on a long stick hung out of her mouth. The man looked annoyed. "And who are you, please?" he said in a nasally voice with a Zaffin accent. "You've interrupted my dinner." Stenstrom drew his pistols. "I'm Paymaster Stenstrom, Lord of Belmont, South Tyrol, captain of the fleet privateer Seeker. With me is Lieutenant Gwendolyn, lady apprentice and chief engineer of the Seeker." "What's your business here?" the man asked. Stenstrom leveled his ints. We are here to effect the rescue of Melazarr, Lady of Caroline. The man glanced at the woman in black, and they both snickered. Yeah, the woman said in an odd, childlike voice. Well, here she is. She reached out with her stork-like arm and seized Melazarr by the hair. She wrenched her head up and placed her other hand on Melazar's mouth and pushed her cheeks in and out, causing her mouth to move as if she were speaking. Hi, the woman said, attempting to imitate Melazar's voice. I'm Melazarr, and I'm a slut and a dumb bitch. The woman fixed her gaze on Stenstrom, and he felt raw malice and chaos pouring out of her. She cooked enough yet? Huh? This fire's hot as fuck, she said to her companion. The man checked over Melazarr with a dark device. Ah, yes, it's here at last. Let me see. The woman glanced at the fire and it went out cold, as if it had been stomped dead and doused. The man held his device. Did you say you're Paymaster Stenstrom of the Fleet Privateer Seeker? Is that correct? Correct. How convenient! Then, per my information here, you are coming with us. He turned to the woman in black. Kill this Caroline woman, she's no longer needed, and kill Paymaster Stenstrom's companion over there as well. Stenstrom cocked his pistols, and Gwendolyn drew her fedula. Turn around, please, and place your hands on the stone where I can see them. The pair of you are to pose to panel. Huh? The woman asked. We're what? You're under arrest per authority of the fleet and the Sisterhood of Light. The woman pushed her lenses up and laughed. Nonplussed, the man opened his coat and drew out a tiny item. Stenstrom had to squint to see it properly. It was a toy hammer about 2.5 inches long and mounted on a ruddy length of wood, serving as a handle. The man had to pinch it between his thumb and forefinger to hold it. He drew a telescoping stick from his coat and mounted the toy hammer to the end. All right, enough of this, Stenstrom said. Drop what you're carrying, step away from Melazarr, and place your hands on the rocks, or I shall put the two of you down right here and now. I'll not ask again. The man glanced at the woman. Well, go on, kill the bitch, incapacitate the paymaster, and let us return to our dinner. Stenstrom fired a green inch-shot globe at each of them. The man had time to scream and drop his hammer as the inch shot sizzled into his chest. He fell to the ground in a heap of newly dead flesh, his mouth locked into a distended O shape. The woman gritted her teeth and watched the shot come in. To Stenstrom's horror, the inch shot stopped in midair and burned like a tiny green sun before her. He felt TK pouring out of her. Only a sister had such power. She gasped in wicked delight. Huh? You like that? Huh? She sent the inch shot back at them. Here, this is yours, I think. Here, she cried as the speeding shot hit Gwen square in the chest. She fell backwards and dropped her fedula as she crashed to the ground. Gwendolyn? He stared at her stupidly for a moment. Gwendolyn? Gwendolyn? Dead! The woman in black leaned down and casually reached into her bag, her back and rear end exposed. He aimed his guns and fired. She swatted the shots aside, sending them in random directions. Some shots hit the ground, killing the grass in a neat circle. She never stopped what she was doing during Stenstrom's fusillade. She stood and pulled back a black watch fob with a long chain out of the bag, then walked over to the dead man. Hoisting his rotund body into the air with one arm, she wound the chain around his neck several times, and then moved the hands on the watch face back about an hour. The man kicked and gasped, sputtering to life. Damn it, woman, he cried. Go get him! Kill him if you want, but make sure it's a nice, clean killing. We can bring him back later. We need his Anatameter. Nonplussed, she lit a fresh cigarette. Yeah, okay. She took a long drag. Hear that, fella? I'm fucking coming to kill you. His ints useless, he faded into the shadows and moved off to the right, trying to get around them. That watch she was carrying had brought the man back from the dead, and it would work for Gwendolyn too. He had to get that watch. Where'd he go? The man cried, picking his hammer back up. Dunno, the woman replied. She held out the watch fob. Hey, mister, you fucking looking for this? Huh? You trying to fucking fix your fucking lady over there? Time's a-wasting. Fucking come and get it! Stenstrom moved east, thinking out a method of attack to get the arcane watch fob from her grasp. As he moved into position, the woman seemed to float off the ground, rising higher and higher and letting the watch fob dangle from its chain between her thumb and forefinger. She hung in the air like a skinny black doorstop. She actually wasn't floating. She was being lifted into the air on 3 black metallic appendages sprouting out from within her gown like a tripod of articulated legs. He'd seen such a thing before. Metallic appendages strapped to the waist and hidden under long coats and gowns, under full control of the wearer, like a prehensile monkey's tail. The vuncula, the Los Capricos weapon of the House of Grenville. A person skilled in using the vuncula had precise control over it and could move the tail with remarkable speed. Vunculas usually sported only 1 tail. This one the woman was wearing had 3, and she was standing on them like a set of stilts. Meanwhile, the man prowled about holding his tiny hammer like a bat. "Lord Belmont, let's be reasonable here. You have something we want. Something we'll kill for, obviously. May I suggest a simple transaction, a swap of goods? We can bring your companion back from the dead. Wouldn't that be nice? In exchange, you give us what we want, the Anatameter." He looked around. "What do you say? 1 piece of goods for another. Huh?" Stenstrom produced a marzible dagger, lined him up, and threw. One of the metallic appendages snaked out of the folds of the woman's gown and punched the dagger out of the way before it could hit. The man gasped in surprise and swung his hammer, clipping a nearby stone and hacking out a huge jagged piece, as if it were a full-size warhammer. "You're overmatched here. You must know that." Stenstrom, still faded to the shadows, attacked. The man squealed in surprise when Stenstrom seized and cuffed him across the cheek. The man swung wildly with his hammer. A lucky blow caught Stenstrom in the midsection. The hammer hit with the bludgeoning power of a weapon many times its volume and weight. Only the sister's power flowing through him kept him from being shattered. Stenstrom subdued the man and wrenched his arm behind his back, causing him to squeal. He appeared from the shadows. "I have your man here," he yelled. The woman grinned and spun the watch fob around her finger. "So fucking what?" she said. "I'll burn him to ashes so there'll be nothing left to reanimate. Now give me the..." The woman belted him across the jaw with one of her 3 vuncula tails. It had moved with uncanny speed. The blow hit with the force of a small grenade and knocked Stenstrom to the ground. "Ha!" the woman cried with glee. Her companion scrabbled away, grabbed his hammer, then fell upon Stenstrom, beating him across the back and shoulders, each blow thundering into him. "Now the deal's off. It's off. Your woman stays dead, and you will be dead too. Then we'll bring you back, and we torture you dead again and again till you feel inclined to hand over the Anatameter." A lithe figure in black appeared, crouching in the grass. "Oh, who's this now?" the man cried, panting from his exertion. Before he could say another word, the figure attacked and raked its claws across his chest. For the second time, the man fell dead, this time in a horrific pile of cubes and sundered flesh. The figure turned to Stenstrom and seized him by the shirt with bloody hands, then pulled him around a stone. It was Kat, her green eyes fixed on him. She spoke close in a growl. "Second time I save you, HRN. Second time. How lucky for you I'm here." She formed an STT in her hand and threw it into the pile. The man's remains burst into red and green flames. Kat put her bloody hand on Stenstrom's chin. "Now," she said, A metal tentacle came down and tore into Kat's neck and shoulder, jerking her high into the air. Kat struggled like a fish on the line and lashed out with laser-like points of shadow tech. The woman in black cast them aside, turning them to ash. The woman brought Kat close to her face and with a burst of TK reduced Kat's brain to jelly. Stenstrom felt the force of it. Kat went limp in her grasp. The woman reared back with the tentacle and flung Kat across the ruins and into the tied-up, burned-up body of Melazarr. The pendants hanging from the wire exploded, no doubt killing both Kat and Melazarr. The woman strode over to Stenstrom and drove him into the ground with a metal tentacle. She glanced at the ashy pile of her former companion flickering in the Shadowtech fire. Now what the fuck am I supposed to do with you? Huh? And that ends Part 1, Chapter 11. The hunt for the Anatameter begins, and it also ends Part 1, the Shadowtech Goddess. So, I didn't mention it at the beginning, but the whole reason they were in the ruins, like Paymaster Stenstrom wanted to talk to Melazarr, she who had survived the attack on her transport ship, and they figured her very merry garter belt, being a mystical arcane item, would have zapped her back to her home grounds like it always did, and she'd be there and they could ask her questions. When they find her, she's tied up to a stone, and I'm not sure if it was clear in the reading, but there was like a very hot little smoldering fire set at her feet, which is basically roasting her alive. And as we saw in previous chapters, there was the angry miser tied around her, the wire tying her to a stone, and with the little ornaments hanging off of it. And there are 2 sympathetic charms that come with the angry miser, and those represent the people who left the angry miser there to guard whatever. And in certain instances, they'll drop off the wire and it'll teleport whoever those people are back to this location. So that's where this guy and this woman came from. They were teleported there by the angry miser. The guy is some Zaffin dude. We've seen him earlier in the story. I won't say his name, it'll be revealed next chapter, but we've seen him already in the story. We've also saw the woman in black, and she's the one with the freaking foul mouth. Now, she, of all the villains in my book, she's probably the most powerful. She's a rough customer, as Paymaster Stenstrom and Gwendolyn just found out. She can do a lot. She can do things that a sister can do, and sisters are extremely powerful. They don't show it very often. They're very reserved in what they let people see them do. Just imagine for a second, as I did, just spitball with me here for a second. Just imagine if a sister decided to give up this chaste life and sleeping on stone, wearing uncomfortable coarse fabrics and eating gruel. Just imagine if one actually entertained her desires and ate really rich foods, indulged herself with drugs and wild, wanton sex, who gave in to every whim and desire she had. She would be pretty hard to deal with. I wonder if that's what we have here, a fallen sister. And I've been wanting to introduce one of them for a while. So here it is. And she pretty much mopped up the floor with Paymaster Stenstrom and apparently killed Gwen. We will find out next chapter, Part 2, The Loves of Paymaster Stenstrom, the first turn. Chapter 1, the HRN. And we'll see how this crazy battle goes. And more profanity. Whenever this lady is around, the profanities are flying. So get your earplugs ready. It's kind of exhilarating, having one person who just cusses like a frickin' sailor. In any event, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.